Let's begin by taking a look around the ZBrush interface. So if we're just starting in ZBrush, the first thing that we want to know is kind of where everything is located and just kind of generally how to get around. So taking a look at the interface here in ZBrush, we'll just kind of start at the top and work our way down. So at the top, you'll notice these little menu items, and this is pretty standard. It's just kind of a top menu, main menu. And so what happens when we click on any of these names is we open up sort of a menu. These are called actually palettes in ZBrush. And so it's kind of a grouping of commands. Here we have one related to using alphas. And we'll talk about the specifics of these as we go on. Here we have brushes and our brush settings, settings dealing with color, our document settings, so the size of our canvas and things like that. We also have our draw settings, so our intensity, that sort of thing. Edit, file, working with our project files, saving those out, being able to manipulate and change those. 2D layers or 2.5D layers. We've got lighting palette, macros, so setting up commands to work all at once, can create macros that way. Marker, material, setting your materials, assigning materials, that sort of thing. Making movies, so not only turntables, but also you can make movies from your history. You can add snapshots to those and can customize those and export those out. Picker, preferences, which self-explanatory. Render, which will have all of our render settings. We can use stencil. There's also a complete stroke palette, so a lot of different things that we can do with the strokes, the way the sculpt or paint is applied. Texture, so working with textures and spotlights. Tool, this is going to be a really important palette for us. This is where we're going to access all of our 3D geometry, all of our subtools. We're going to do a lot of work with our tool palette. It's going to be probably the main thing that we're going to focus on. Also the transform palette, so kind of moving around. And then our plugins and Z-scripts. So you'll notice with all of these, as I kind of click on those, you see this little icon that we can sort of hover over. And so what we can do is actually dock any of these palettes within the trays in ZBrush. And so we've got two main trays here on the sides. I can open and close those trays by clicking on this little divider. And what we can do is drop our different palettes inside of those trays. So right now we've got the tool palette on the right side, the material palette on the left side. You'll notice if I go back and access, let's say, the material palette from the main menu, it disappears from the tray. That's because it only exists in one place at a time. So we can't go into multiple or have multiple different palettes of the same thing open at a time. It's only going to exist in one spot. So we can access this palette over here. You'll notice there are also little sections here, and these are sub-palettes that we can open up or minimize. And so there's a lot of information in some of these, and we can maximize those as needed as part of our palette. So we've got our main overall palette and then our sub-palette. We can also drop in additional palettes. Let's say we want to add our alpha palette. We can go ahead and click on this and drag it down. And now we have a couple of palettes. And we can click and drag to scroll up and down, or we can close the tray itself. And this allows us to really access those tools that we need very quickly. We could do the same thing over here, add additional palettes to our trays. And we'll typically be working on the left and the right hand side. All right. Now we're not going to customize our interface too much, because I think that's something more for you to do once you get a feel of the tools that you use often, those techniques that you want to be able to repeat very quickly. Once you start to work with ZBrush for a while, you'll get used to saying, okay, you know what, I use this a lot and I really wish it was somewhere else. You can really customize the interface a lot. We're not going to go in that far as the interface goes. I think it's going to be good just to use the standard interface to learn some of the tools and techniques that we can use in ZBrush. So right below the main menu with all of the palettes, you'll see three buttons over here on the side. The projection master, which is a way of adding sculpted and painted detail via projection. We also have Lightbox, and this is where we can access all of our assets. So all of the assets that come with ZBrush, we can access those by clicking on Lightbox. We can go into different projects, different Z tools, different materials or noise, fibers. So this is kind of our asset library. We can also activate that with the comma. All right, quick sketch is a kind of a way of quickly sketching out detail in here, but mainly we'll be talking about or using Lightbox. We also have some very important buttons here. These deal with when we draw out our 3D geometry. Edit object is going to be very important, as well as draw, move, scale, and rotate, so moving things around. We also have our poly painting settings here for whether we're painting with materials and color, whether we're just painting with color or just material, and then the intensity of that paint. Also, when we're sculpting, do we want to pull it out with Z add, or do we want to push it in with Z sub, and the intensity at which that happens. We also have focal shift and draw size that deals with how our brush behaves. All right, now down the right we have ways of looking at our canvas. So we can scroll around, we can zoom in and out, we can show the actual size, and then we have some buttons down here that work that deal with more of the 3D geometry, so framing up on it, moving, scaling, rotating, that sort of thing. On the left hand side, starting from the top, we can access our 3D brushes, we can access different strokes, and then we can apply different alphas or textures to those strokes. Finally, we can choose materials to work with. We can paint with material or add it all at once, and then our colors. So really going to be working a lot on this left-hand side. We're going to be working with the tool palette quite a bit. Okay, and then all of our settings up here. So really the border of our canvas is going to be very important for us to be able to access. And we'll talk about all of these settings in a little bit more detail. All right, so this, again, large space in the center is going to be our canvas. Now you can do just illustration in here with depth if you want to, and we'll talk more about that, sort of how ZBrush deals with depth in the next lesson, but you could just draw and paint in here if you wanted to. Come in and get an alpha and come in and paint with depth, and you can create illustrations this way. You can also work with your 3D objects, and when we have 3D objects in our scene, this turns into more of a 3D workspace where we can kind of rotate around and move around, but at this point we can't. Okay, we can clear the canvas by hitting Control N and start to draw out something new, and I'm just using the simple brush, which we can access in our tool palette. If I open up that tool palette, you'll notice there are 3D meshes and then there are 2.5D brushes. And when we're out of our sort of 3D edit mode, we can use these 2.5 brushes on this flattened canvas. And again, we'll go into more depth on that whole process and what we're actually talking about in the next lesson. We can also change the background of this. So going under Document, kind of right down here, I can change the back to a black just by clicking and dragging onto the color that I want. So whenever we're picking colors, all we have to do is click on the picker and then drag to the color we want. All right, and you can also change the gradient. So I can take that gradient by just changing that range down to 0, which I'll do there. Okay, so that's kind of a look around the interface. So we'll talk more in depth, and I'm not going to really skip over too much. This is going to be very well-paced course. If you're just getting into ZBrush, we're not going to go too fast for you. So in the next lesson, let's talk more about the way ZBrush handles depth. We'll talk about something called pixels and the 2.5D canvas. So we'll go ahead and take a look at that in the next lesson.